by saying thank you so much for making such an important film. I sat down and watched it, and I have to say it is an absolutely amazing documentary, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. That means the world. That's awesome to hear.
I guess my first question comes from a weird place because I had a partner that I was seeing years ago murdered while I was dating her, and I've always found it
So sorry.
I've always found it so difficult to do anything creative around that. So I was wondering what sparked you to make the documentary in the first place.
Yeah, I did want to avoid it for a while. It took a couple years to dive into it. But I was trying other methods to try to make myself feel better. Like I went to talk therapy, I tried a couple of different things that just weren't cutting it. They weren't, I wasn't improving at the rate that I wanted to. And I kind of exhausted what I thought were the options. And I thought, you know what, well, what my art is film, and I wanted to kind of attack it head on as art therapy. And it's just, I'm sure as you know, it's just so hard to come to terms with someone like being intentionally taken. It's just any loss is tough, but that's a different kind of grief, and there's just so many more questions, I think.
Yep.
And exploring those questions through the film, was very helpful to me. And it was very difficult to start. Like you said, it's a hard subject to get started on. But then when I dove into it, I just became obsessed, and it fueled me through the trials, which took some time to get to. So it actually was very important for me in my healing, if you can call it that, as much as I've healed anyways. And so that kind of was how it started.
If you don't mind me asking, where did it actually start, the actual filmmaking process, of course, because when you're putting together a documentary, normally you sit down and plan things out. How did this documentary actually start for you from that moment of starting to film?
Well, at first I started making a short film that was just kind of like in remembrance piece of Alice, and it just didn't seem like enough. It seemed like there was so much more to explore and talk about. And, how do you? It was tough to carve her life down into a 90-minute film. A 5-minute short was certainly not going to cut it and make me feel like it was ample. So then it just started expanding. I thought, well, hear some other voices and have other people tell me how wonderful Alice was, and not just the original was just kind of like a voiceover narration of me talking about her, and it just I wanted to, and also I wanted to learn more stories. Like going on interviewing these people, I learned so many new things about Alice that I didn't know, and it was wonderful to kind of make new memories that way. Like I was really forging new memories without. And I didn't really think I'd have the opportunity to do that again. And so it actually, it ended up, it ended up being pretty wonderful to go that route.
So how did your family receive the news when you first said that you wanted to make the film? Well, that must have been a difficult conversation for you to have as well, sitting down and telling your family.
Yeah, you're right about that. My wife was terrified. She thought it was, I was already in a pretty dark place and was having trouble healing and then staying in a good mindset. And so she was just terrified that I would go to a dark place and I wouldn't get out. And I think the rest of my family kind of felt that way too. I think my brother thought, like, what's the point? Like, why are you putting yourself through this? And my mom, I think, was the most supportive because she wanted some kind of remembrance piece. But once it became a little bit more, I think she's a little apprehensive about being in the film and things like that. But she ended up being a really key character, and I don't think we could have made the film without her.
Yeah. Did it end up being very cathartic and part of your healing process to be able to sit down and talk to family members and talk to people that knew Alice while you were making the film as well?
yes, I think that was the most, cathartic and healing. Was talking to these people that many of them I hadn't known previously, but I knew of them from Alice, and so getting to meet them for the first time under terrible circumstances, but then hearing some fun stories about Alice, and some people, in particular, Alice's friend from high school, Audrey McWeston, we're like best friends now, and it's so funny that I never would have been friends with her had I not made this film. And so it's kind of like Alice is living on that way, and then now that we have a friendship and a close friendship, and it's nice to be able to remember her that way.
Definitely. From a filmmaking point of view, what ended up being the most challenging part of the documentary? Was there a part that was very, very tough to get through?
I think the anxiety leading up to interviewing my mother about it, that was a very long and difficult interview. And it's not like, my mom and I have talked about what happened all the time, but letting the outside public into those conversations was not something that either of us anticipated. So that was difficult for sure. Yeah.
The other question I had was sorry.
I feel like there's something more to that question, and I totally forgot. Can you remind me what the original question was again?
Yeah, from a filmmaking point of view, what were the challenges that you faced when you were putting the documentary together?
Sorry. Hardest part for me is editing, because I felt like we got these wonderful interviews, but they're so long. I mean, each interview is the length of a feature film. So how do you trim all of that down into something and feel like you're getting to the heart of it, but not leaving anything out, but, trimming it down enough so that it's watchable, digestible to someone who didn't know Alice and, doesn't particularly care going into the film. That was the hardest part for me, is omitting so many great interviews and scenes and things that just didn't fit the film as well as what ended up in the whole.
Yeah. A great Australian documentary filmmaker said to me once that one of the reasons why he loves making documentaries is that, unlike a regular feature film, you never know where the story is going to go. He said that one interview can change the entire narrative of the documentary. Were there moments like that for you where you discovered something that changed the direction that the documentary was going to go in?
100%, yes. I think, it's interesting, a fiction film, you plan and you plan and you write and you write, and then when you get there, all the work's pretty much done. You just have to execute it. And in documentary films, you plan as much as you can, but you can't, they're real people with real answers that maybe you don't expect sometimes, and sometimes that just takes such a left turn. The writing's really done in editing. And I never wanted to be in the film. That's probably the biggest thing that changed, was that it's kind of centered around me in a lot of ways. I kind of guide the audience through my processes and my journey throughout the film. And I wanted it to be about Alice, not about me. But, it actually is about Alice the more that I'm in it, because it's, about my personal relationship with her and remembering her and the grief involved. That was a huge change. But also, I never anticipated putting the assailants on screen, being able to go to the trial and getting permission to film it. I definitely didn't think that was going to happen. And that was a super important part of the film, because it really gives the audience a different look at the true crimes narrative. They're very popular now, and it's interesting that they're okay. Well, we have a portion of that, but then you see, like, you go beyond the crime and realize, oh my gosh, there are real people behind this that are suffering in their grief. And I think that's kind of what makes the film unique, and it was super important, and something I never thought I'd be able to capture.
Definitely. How difficult was that to get permission to film in court? Because I come from a country where not even a news camera crew is allowed to film in court. The only thing they ever have allowed to be filmed here in the last couple of years, it has been what they call the judge's closing statement, and even then it's done by court photographers. Right. How difficult was that to actually get permission to film in court?
So I think in the United States, it's kind of a state-by-state basis. And then in Georgia, the policy was that the judge just had to sign off on it. He just had to be okay with the courtroom being on camera. And there are certain rules about, we couldn't include close-ups of the jury or really any in-focus shots of the jury. But other than that, it actually was surprisingly easy. It was more the anticipation of trying to get the signature that was worrisome, but then it was surprisingly easy, to be honest. But I don't know if it's that way across the nation. I think I just got lucky.
Yeah. Ed, to start to wrap up, I wanted to ask, what did you want your audience to take away from this documentary? Like you said, the world at the moment is fascinated by true crime series and documentaries, but a lot of those series, things like Tiger King and Dr. Death, you feel that they're there for entertainment purposes. Your documentary is very, very different. What do you want audiences to take away from this documentary when they sit down and watch it?
I think that it's important to remember, as fun as they are and as exciting as they are, it is important to remember that there are real life, victims' families that are left in the wake of these crime stories that we enjoy listening to, and I think creating awareness about that, and that it's not all just fun and exciting. That was important to me, because I feel like that's a void in the true crime world. We don't hear a lot from the victims' families, and certainly they're not the main focus ever. And I did want to showcase Alice. She just was such a wonderful person and such a beautiful soul. And I think that when someone's taken horrifically like that, we want to think that maybe they were involved with something that they shouldn't have been, something nefarious, so that we can feel like, well, that couldn't happen to me because I don't make those choices. And in her case, she didn't make those choices, and it still happened. So I did want to preserve her good name and show the world how wonderful she was. But I think on a broader scale, I did want to create some awareness. I mean, it's in the news all the time now, but about gun violence and how horrible it is, and about the victims' families that are left behind, and the loved ones that just will never be the same after someone's taken that way. But also on a happier note, I really wanted people to realize, like, Alice was just someone who woke up that day and had no idea this was going to happen. Like, didn't live that lifestyle, was healthy, didn't have any awareness that her life is about to come to an end. And that could be any one of us. And I think that we take so much for granted. And I hope that people watch the film and realize, oh my gosh, my life is so short. I really need to do the things I want to do when I have the chance. And lastly, I think what's really important is that this film is a lot about how people grieve and what it's like, and how everyone grieves differently, and that's okay. And for me, like, being open and honest about these difficult questions and difficult answers at times, and not shying away from that, was very important. And I think that especially men, we try really hard to not be honest about our feelings, and I think that that's very detrimental. And I'm certainly a case study for the fact that once I was super open and honest about it, I started to feel better. And that, not pushing it down, not compartmentalizing it, was super important for me. And I hope that someone who's grieving can watch this and realize that shying away from it isn't the answer. That it's okay to not be okay. And I also hope that people who are close to people who are grieving, that it shows them that, patience is key. There are going to be moments where you feel great, and then all of a sudden everything comes crashing down on you again out of nowhere. Something can trigger it that you never saw coming. And that it's important to be patient with those people. And, we hope that they can be patient for you if you ever need the support. So, yeah, a lot of things, I guess.